I want to point out this westernmost drive here, in the two drives that are along LBJ, the volleyball courts, and also the configuration of the parking lot. Just to point out, because you'll see that's some of the differences that you'll see in the proposed site plan. So on your screen now is the proposed detailed site plan. The amendment proposes to make modifications to the proposed development and in some of the configuration of the development, not necessarily the uses or the general spirit of what was approved. Some of the major modifications include removing the westernmost driveway along LBJ. As you can see here, that second driveway is no longer there. So there's just a single driveway access to this development from LBJ frontage road. Another item to point out is that this proposed site plan does propose to be developed in two phases. The first phase will be 3 buildings, buildings 3, 4, and 5, and all of the site improvements. And then phase 2, which is outlined in in blue here, is the second phase of the development, which will be the construction of 2 buildings, buildings 1 and building 2. Other modifications include the parking lot layout has been reconfigured. The sand volleyball courts that were to the west are no longer being proposed. Building 5 here, the building footprint itself did decrease slightly by 362 square feet. Also, this easternmost lot line was realigned, so the lot size increased from 9.59 acres to what is shown on the site plan, which is 10.18 acres. Also, the sidewalk that's along LBJ is now being moved to private property due to the existing open ditch that exists along LBJ. As I mentioned, there are 5 restaurant buildings, 3 of which will be built with phase 1 and 2 with phase 2. Cumulatively, the buildings are 65,878 square feet in total, including 8,333 square feet of outdoor patio space that will be used for the associated restaurant uses. As you all may recall, there is a development agreement for this site between the city and the applicant, and also there are performance obligations within PD 99 that are required of this development, which includes that 75% of the cumulative gross square footage developed on this site has to be used for restaurant and or commercial indoor amusement. Additionally, no more than 10% of the total gross square footage can be dedicated to 10% of the proposed retail can be used for personal service. So that's beauty salons, nail salons, that sort of thing. The proposed site plan isn't compliant with that development agreement, given the restaurant portion will be 49,409 square feet, and the retail will be 16,469 square feet of the total cumulative. At the time when this site is developed and we receive certificate of occupancy requests for the tenant spaces, that's when we'll be looking at the 10% for personal service shops, as those potential tenants come into those spaces. Some other items to point out is the access. As I mentioned, the proposed access to the west will be eliminated, and one point of access will be provided from LBJ Freeway. When the property or the tract to the east is developed, there will be opportunity for cross access. The developer is proposing a access easement on the proposed drive aisle that's shown in gray, which is also the fire lane. So that will be shared in the future when the eastern portion of this parent tract, if you will, is developed. On your site now is the landscape plan. The there are some general modifications with the landscape plan given the general site modification. It's generally in line with what was previously approved. PD 99 doesn't have a minimum percentage of landscape that's required for the site. However, it does have minimum street tree requirements and minimum square footage of landscaping within the parking lot area. So this site does meet the internal parking landscape by providing 7,985 square feet of landscape within the parking, and also providing 46 shade trees along 46 trees, along the frontage road, as you can see here. This development is proposing also a multi-tenant pylon sign. The previous approved detailed site plan had a second monument sign. However, due to the site going to one point of access, only one multi-tenant pylon sign is proposed for this development. That will remain the same, 36 feet in height, and it will be a multi-tenant pylon sign, so it'll allow for multiple tenants to be located on this pylon sign. In regards to the building signage, or what we call wall signage, PD 99 does require that a comprehensive sign plan be provided with the detailed site plan. However, those of you that were on the commission at the time, the previous detailed site plan was considered, a condition was approved with that site plan that required the tenant or the applicant to provide a sign plan before the first, at the time that the buildings were being proposed to be constructed, that a sign plan be dedicated in order to see how all of the signage would be placed on these buildings. This condition is being carried through with this detailed site plan. So staff is recommending that the condition that a comprehensive wall sign plan for all buildings be provided prior to a certificate of occupancy being given for the first shell building. So when the first building is ready to be CO'd or a certificate of occupancy be granted, the applicant will have to provide a sign plan for the entire development before that can be issued. Some other items to point out are the trail system that is being developed on this site. The on-site trail that you can see the 12-foot hike and bike trail along the existing retaining wall will remain. So that's the portion along the boardwalk, if you will, that faces the lake. This portion will be constructed with the first phase of the development. Also, the applicant is required to build a portion of off-site trail to the west that will connect this 12-foot hike and bike trail to the existing trail system that'll serve nearby existing multifamily development. So, and that portion is currently under construction. Also want to point out that when the lot to the east develops, this 12-foot hike and bike trail will also be required to be continued and connect to the city's larger hike and bike trail system to kind of close that loop. I'm going to go through the building elevations quickly here. These are generally staying the same. The development agreement requires that all the buildings on the site comply with PD 99 standards. Through the development agreement, as you all are aware, our zoning, we cannot enforce architectural standards through the zoning ordinance. However, since this site does have a development agreement, that development agreement requires compliance with PD 99 architectural standards. The buildings are not proposed to be modified as far as architectural or material standpoint. This is building 1 elevation. The star here indicates the portion that will be facing the frontage road. Building 2 here will also remain the same as previously approved. Building 3 also will remain the same. Building 4 will also remain the same. And then building 5 will generally remain the same. This building did get a little bit smaller, as I mentioned before, by a little over 360 square feet, but is generally consistent with what was previously approved. Oh, sorry. This detailed site plan, or the previous approved detailed site plan, had 4 special exceptions that were approved. Those do have to be reconsidered with this site plan amendment, and there is also 1 new special exception that will also be considered. I'll go through these. I won't go quite into detail. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those. But the first 2 I want to just cover, since they're related to each other, are special exceptions 2 and 4. Special exception number 2 is related to the requirement of 50% of the commercial building being within 50 feet of the required 10-foot setback, meaning that there be a maximum of 60 feet setback for all buildings. As you can see, this building is set back about 200 feet from LBJ Freeway. Therefore, the applicant is requesting a special exception to that. And then special exception number 4 is related to the amount of parking that can be located between the building and the street frontage, and no more than 25% being within that space. And as you can see, more than 25% of the parking is provided between the building and the street right-of-way. Therefore, the applicant is requesting a special exception to that requirement. And those 2 requirements are just more related to having the building up towards the street. However, given that this is intended, there is a body of water that's intended to be an amenity for this development, staff believes that this special exception is appropriate for this specific development. Special exceptions 1 and 3 are related to the architectural standards for PD 99. These are related to wall openings and minimum window fenestration, or the visibility into the building. The building 5, as you can see here, the window opening is, the width is much wider than the height, so they have to seek a special exception to that. And also the fenestration for all buildings is required to be at least 60% and not more than 90. All buildings are needing a special exception to that, so that special exception is also being requested. The new special exception number 5 that is needed for this development is to the minimum required parking. With all the square footages for restaurant and retail, this development is required 395 parking spaces to be provided. Only 393 parking spaces are being proposed with this development due to changes that are being proposed. Staff believes that this special exception is appropriate given the marginal percentage of the exception. It's only 2 parking spaces that are needed. Also, I just want to point out that the city just adopted new parking ratios for our comprehensive zoning ordinance, so properties that don't have their own or any of our what we call straight zoning districts, any R1 or R1 local retail 1 or commercial properties, zoning properties, those have a different parking requirement, and those have been reduced. So if we, just to kind of give you an insight on the modification, if we had applied those new parking ratios to this development, they would only be required 144 parking spaces, which is more than half. So I just want to point that out. I also want to mention, and this is in my staff report, and I won't get into too much detail, but the applicant has indicated to us that at some point they do anticipate to have a 6th building on the site. Obviously, at that time, the site plan will have to be amended and parking will have to be reevaluated. I just want to point that out because if parking does become an issue as far as not meeting the minimum, the other option the applicant has and they're aware of is doing a parking study, which evaluates the peak demands on parking based on the uses that are on the site. And at that time, it's possible that there will be tenants and it'll be better time to evaluate those parking demands at that time. With that, I will just go to our comprehensive zoning ordinance. This site is located within the west side plan and is designated or is within the employment district. Although the existing PD 99 standards allows for the restaurant and retail uses by right and supports this proposed development. The proposed detailed site plan amendment is in compliance with PD 99 and also in line with our comprehensive zoning ordinance, given that it's constructing amenities for our nearby residents and also constructing the hike and bike trails as an amenity for the development and also residents that are within the west side. With that, I will close with staff is recommending approval for this detailed site plan and all 5 special exceptions, and also requesting that the condition of the site sign plan be placed on this approval. With that, I'll close, and I'm available for questions, and the applicant is here as well if there are any of the applicant.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm going to go ahead and call Mr. Beatty forward because I know there's going to be questions for him. I have this feeling. If you could state your name and address for the record.
Michael Beatty, 1800 Valley View Lane.
Thank
How are
you.
y'all tonight?
Good.
It's been a year. What caused the main change that we're here for this evening is a conflict with the bridge on the frontage road and our west entrance. So that wasn't something that we picked to do. It was something that was required, working things out with TxDOT. So that was the first trigger. Second trigger is we've had a lot of interest in the QSR pad site, which you now see laid out in the parking field. And we have run through a draft of the parking study. Once we're able to secure that tenant, we'll be back in front of you for the SUP for that pad site with the appropriate parking study to go with it. Our 3 buildings, 3, 4, and 5, the permits are on Danielle Summers' desk. So hopefully we can get this approved and then we'll be able to start construction there. Lake excavation is complete. I am waiting on the final surveyor exhibit to give to Mr. Bentley upstairs. We are under construction on the weir and the trail to make the connection to the west. And I think, the fountains. I don't know if y'all seen the site, but we actually have the temporary overhead electricity wire hung to get the fountains to have power by the end of the year. Fountains are here, they're all there at the shop. And we just need a good rain to fill the lake back up. And we'll set the fountains and go.
Super. I'm going to start with Commissioner Zavalas.
I actually don't have too many questions. I did just want to ask Jennifer, Mr. Beatty, you may be able to answer this question though. She mentioned a 6th building potential. Where would that be laid out? If you could just point with the mouse. Where the volleyball courts were at? Is that where you guys?
Right here. That's part of the original parking field.
Okay, I see that. I'm sorry.
We gained, when we lost the west entrance, it got close enough to where we could squeeze in one more pad site and still make the parking
Okay,
work.
so you're saying that's the pad site that you're getting
Yes.
interest for? Okay.
Yes, but we are clear on the understanding that we have to come back once we have a tenant, go for an SUP with a drive-through.
And could you remind me again, I know you're up here a lot, so, and forgive me for forgetting, what was the story with the volleyball courts? Was that just a business idea that didn't
Yes.
pan out and that's why the volleyball, okay.
Correct.
All right. No questions.
Thank you, Gio. Vice Chair Williams.
My only question is maybe for the city is what's the condition of the wall signage? What's the idea behind that?
Sure. So PD 99 actually requires that a master sign plan be provided with a detailed site plan for all wall signage or attached signs on the building. Given that tenants are not necessarily all or all spaces are filled, the applicant doesn't have a full sign plan ready to be submitted. So the condition is just that a sign plan be provided before the first certificate of occupancy is granted for the first shell building that's ready to be occupied.
Perfect. And I'm assuming y'all are on board with that. Perfect.
Commissioner Brittle.
So actually, I like the sand court's gone. I think it's a better situation, and this is Texas. So can you imagine the heat coming off of that sand out there? So I'm going to ask you, what do you plan to do with that? So I see it's an open space, great, it's planted, great. But is it just going to be, are you going to have picnic tables out there, seating out there, a pad out there, what?
Well, our tenants, we're starting from the east, working to the west. When we get to what's labeled as building 1, we may have to look at expanding a patio or something out to that space. But right now, we're focused on the first 3 buildings and just trying to leave that area as flexible as possible. It may end up being a dog park. One of the gentlemen that works on the restaurants with Mr. Moyetti was showing me today, there's a thing called Mutts in Uptown, which is just a dog park and a little food shack. And it's incredibly popular. And that would be a great location for that kind of use.
So again, I didn't quite hear what that building 6 would be.
Oh, it is a a quick service food with a drive-through. We're looking at either Raising Cane's or potentially another coffee shop.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Petraza.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Cole.
No questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Jones.
Real quick, I want to ask, because we're being asked to make some changes that are based on amenitizing the lake that's been fraught with challenges to get here, or fountains and things that are due by the 31st and we're 2 weeks out, based on the history to get to this point, what assurances can you provide this commission, the City of Farmers Branch, and the residents of the west side, particularly Mercer Crossing, that there's going to be the adequate level of follow-through on this project that supports us approving this change today?
Well, what you have in front of you tonight doesn't change anything with the amenities on the lake. And we have the developers agreement modification from last summer that has a significant financial penalties if we do not perform. And we have performed. I just need a good rain basically to fill it up. We're actually looking to start pumping back in from the creek if we have to.
Well, that answers my question with the lake, but I'm asking about the overall project, that the buildings that are going to go in positions that we're approving today.
The developers agreement has the penalties for the buildings as well. Those 3 buildings are actually fully permitted now. Daniel Summers could not release those permits until the DSP's been approved. And we also have a grading release from Mr. Bentley. We had to resubmit to TxDOT. There was some disagreement with TxDOT as far as the alignment of the decel lane. Hopefully that's resolved, but that's 3 to 6 months out anyway. I've got to do wet utilities first. So grading and then wet utilities. And then once we're able to pull permits, we'll start the 3 buildings.
All right, and so you've mentioned the development agreement several times. Having been here when this issue has come up to extend the development deadlines, am I in a position where the people on the west side can rely that the intention is to continue to honor that agreement and not seek further extension?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Byrne.
No question.
Super. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Any more questions for staff or for the applicant? All right, seeing none. This is a public hearing. I will now open the public hearing. If you would like to come and speak on this topic, you can step forward to the dais, state your name and address for the record. Seeing we have no one to speak, I will now close the public hearing. There's no one online, right? Correct. No. Okay, super. And commissioners, I will entertain a motion.
I motion to recommend approval of the detailed site plan and requested special exemptions with the condition as recommended by staff.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Williams to recommend approval of the detailed site plan and requested special exceptions with the condition as recommended by staff. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Bertle. All in favor? It is unanimous. This goes to council
January 5th.
January 5th.
Yes. That's right.
Thank you. And finally, Item D2, conduct a public hearing and consider a request to amend the comprehensive zoning ordinance, including but not limited to amending Article 2.9, accessory uses and structures as it relates to accessory buildings and placement requirements, and take appropriate action.
Thank you, Chairman Moore. Good evening, everyone. Shrupa Sen, Senior Planner. Can you all see my screen? I assume that as a yes. As Commissioner Bartle mentioned during the study session, this won't be the first time we are looking at this particular section of the comprehensive zoning ordinance, in particular section 2.9, which has regulations for accessory uses and structures. This particular, I hope this will be the last one, but I can't be too hopeful. This particular amendment, this first slide that you have in front of you, I have tried to summarize what we are doing or what we are proposing to do tonight with this amendment and what was the purpose of this amendment. First of all, we are proposing two particular amendments regarding setbacks, one for attached accessory structures which are open on all three sides to reduce their rear yard setback requirement to 5 feet if they're located next to a golf course or an open public space lot. And the second amendment we are proposing with this is for detached accessory structures to reduce their, on corner lots, to reduce their side yard setback requirement to 3 feet if the structure is less than 200 square feet in size, if it's less than maximum 10 feet in height, and also screened by a minimum 6-foot tall solid fence around the rear yard. So in a snapshot, that's what we are proposing tonight on this amendment. What was the purpose of the amendment? We are trying to accommodate homeowners unable to meet required setback requirements for these accessory structures, and we have been directed by City Council to look into these solutions on November 17 at their study session discussion. A little bit of detail on the current CZO requirements. So currently the setback requirements, and again, I'm keeping it very focused on what we are amending tonight. So we're only looking at the setback requirements or the placement requirement for accessory structures. So currently, of course, the CZO defines accessory structures. There are two types of accessory structures. Attached structures, which are defined as either physically attached to the main house or within 10 feet of the main house or main structure, and the detached ones, which are located more than 10 feet away from the structure. From a setback standpoint, attached accessory structures are required to meet the same setback as the main structure or the main house. The detached accessory structures, there are two ways. For interior lot lines, there is a 3-foot side yard setback for detached structures. However, if that same detached structure is located on a corner lot, the side yard facing the street side usually have to meet a 10-foot side yard setback. However, if the plat for that particular lot has a more restrictive side yard setback, then they have to meet that more restrictive side yard setback for the detached accessory structure. So thus the setback requirement increases a lot more from the 3 foot for an interior lot to 10 foot or even higher. So a little bit of background, as I mentioned initially, that why we are doing the CZO amendment, because we have heard from residents that there were two particular requests that was received by the city and processed through the Zoning Board of Adjustment because they could not meet the variance request and because they could not meet the setback requirement. So that's how this discussion started. So the first request, or one of the requests, was regarding an attached accessory structure, in this case a pergola. The required 10-foot rear yard setback could not be met because the homeowner had a narrow rear yard, and the desired size for the large pergola, he could not fit the structure within the rear yard while also meeting the 10-foot rear yard setback. The second request was for a detached accessory structure from a different homeowner for a storage shed. This one required a 15-foot side yard setback. It was on a corner lot, and the plat already had a designated 15-foot side yard setback shown on the plat. So the detached structure had to meet the 15-feet side yard setback. There are multiple things with this particular request, because When homeowners try to locate the storage shed or smaller structures, they try to locate it more towards the side of the yard, more towards the fence. Pushing it 15 feet towards the interior of the rear yard makes it a bit difficult in terms of locating the structure, maintaining the lawn, and makes the rest of the rear yard a bit impractical from a usability standpoint. So those two requests were presented to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, and they were denied because none of those were property hardship related requests. However, based on council direction received, we have tried to, the Community Services Director, Hugh Pender, presented these discussion points to City Council on November 17th and received their direction. In terms of effectiveness of the proposed amendment that we are looking at tonight, first of all, irrespective of these two amendments that are being proposed, any new accessory structures are still going to be required to meet all the other zoning and building code requirements. So, for example, you still have to meet the maximum lot coverage requirements. So even if we give you a relaxation on the setback requirement, if the structure is too large and exceeds the maximum lot coverage, then that will not be allowed. So the first one, the reduced rear yard setback for the attached accessory structure. The reasoning behind the 10-foot minimum separation comes from the IBC or International Building Code, and it's because there is a 10-foot minimum separation required for non-fire rated structures. So to allow a 5-foot rear yard setback for those open accessory structures, when the lot is adjacent to open space lots, the justification was it ensures that no structures will probably be built within 10 feet of this attached structure if we permit them to go closer to the property line on the rear lot line. The second solution, which was for in terms of detached accessory structure on a corner lot, if the structure is small enough and it's less than 200 square feet in size and has a maximum height of 10 feet, it will ensure that the structure is not visible from the street side, because that was the reasoning behind requiring a higher setback for these structures on a corner lot. And the proper screening in staff opinion will allow that. So that is the summary of what we are proposing tonight to the Commission. If you have any question, I'll be happy to answer, and if you have any suggestions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Shrupa. Commissioners, any questions?
I do.
Commissioner Zavala.
Linda, I'll let you go first. Go ahead.
I don't have a question. I'm thinking, how would you follow all that?
You give me too much credit. You might take that back after I ask this question. So if when you go back a couple, maybe a slide or two, you were talking about an attached accessory structure or something like a pergola. I think you.
The variance request?
Well, you were talking about. No, go to the next slide. Next one, or was that the last slide? No, it definitely wasn't that one.
How about this or this?
No, sorry. Can you go back a couple? Let me just ask the question, and you can
Yes.
answer it however you see fit. So, I guess a pergola. There's a couple ways individuals do pergolas, right? Sometimes they come off the roof line, and others it would be an independent structure that's parallel to the house or
Right.
along the house soffit. So. Where does that fall in? Because I guess when I looked at this, I saw that there was different requirements based on it being a detached, which a pergola could be detached, but a pergola could also be attached.
So I think we're at the correct slide, if I may. So the way the CZO defines attached versus detached, attached is either physically attached or within 10 feet of the main structure. So the said pergola can either be physically attached
Or within 10
or
feet.
can be within 10 feet. Whereas
you wrote in the
detached,
slide.
if the pergola is detached, it has to be more than 10 feet away from the main structure, and that's when the different set of rules kick in. The setback requirements are already lower for detached structures if they're on interior lots.
Physically attached or within 10 feet. So it can be within 10 feet of the main structure, but not actually be attached to the structure.
Yes.
it would just be defined as an attached, okay.
Yes, that's how the CZO right now defines. Yeah, it's a little.
God, that's confusing.
It seems odd, and I understand, and you have to read these a couple of different times to get them to sink in. It's my understanding the reason for if the structure is within 10 feet of the main structure, it's related to building code requirement. So there are maybe additional requirements that have to come into play in terms of construction standards compared to if the structure is more than 10 feet setback. So it's a little confusing because you think attached is either physically connected to and there's no space between the accessory building and the main structure, or if you have space then you'd be completely detached. So complete logic does not apply in that aspect of the definitions, but it goes back to building code requirements. It's my understanding the changes to the definition predate Shrupa on this, but it's my understanding we had some previous challenges under old regulations related to accessory structures because of this whole 10-foot provision, so hence why it reads the way it does today.
And I believe there was a little bit of portion of the confusion being what differentiates from a building addition versus an attached accessory structure.
You're correct. I'm sure it played into it.
Follow-up question. So it looks like this, one of the things we're looking at are corner lots. So what about like cul-de-sac lots? Because sometimes cul-de-sac lots are also have some weird geometry where they may, have some setbacks that are probably not perfect for people who may want to have accessory structures. Are we defining a corner lot truly as a corner lot, or where does a cul-de-sac lot fall in?
Okay, so we dealt with it last time when we looked at the front entry garage issue for cul-de-sac lots, if I am recollecting it correctly. So for corner lot, the distinguishing factor is you have two streets. One is your front facade where the house is facing the street, and you also have another street on the side. And the comprehensive zoning ordinance requires the side that is facing on the secondary street or the other street also have to meet the main structures or the 10 feet side yard. And in this particular case, there was an even more restrictive side yard setback. However, for a cul-de-sac lot, it can be an interior lot. And if it's an interior lot, which means that you just have the cul-de-sac, which is the frontage of the lot, the curvilinear line, and then you have two side lot lines, which has two other residential lots next to each other. So those are considered to be interior lot lines, and they will be required to have just 3-foot side yard setback. They will not be required to have a 10-foot side yard setback for detached accessory structures.
Okay.
Did that?
Oh, that answered the question.
Okay.
I think you'd be hard pressed probably to find a corner cul-de-sac lot.
Well, I know that doesn't exist. I'm just asking from the geometry standpoint on some of the
Right.
cul-de-sac lots, the lot lines sometimes are weird, right? A pie
They
shape.
are.
So that's why I was asking. I could see how some of that, but if she just answered the question, I guess it's not an issue based on the way that the code is currently written.
Correct.
Yeah. they will
The
not-
challenge many times with corner lots, and Shrupa, correct me if I'm wrong, is, technically because you have two streets that are involved, then technically you have two street frontages. So it's usually considered, two street frontage from a zoning setback, unless there is a platted setback that comes into play where it officially designated it as a side yard and gave it a different dimension. Because if you think about your front yard setbacks, we reduced many of the setbacks here, a couple years ago down to 20 feet. And so with them being at 20 feet, normally on the side yard, you would have a 20-foot requirement that would come into play, but in many cases, because of when our subdivisions were laid out, they platted a side yard setback, so they might have established it at 15 feet, or maybe in some cases 10 feet. So you have to factor in the platted setback requirement in addition to how a lot is defined within the zoning ordinance.
Commissioner Brittle.
So I know that we've called this pergola, but I know that there's covered patios and there's other definitions. And so are we encompassing all of those buildings?
So basically for the attached ones, what we have proposed in this amendment is open on 3 sides. So I want to point out, we had mentioned, or I had written in the background section, open air. That's a bit misleading. It's not necessarily open air. It's open on 3 sides. So a pergola can, a structure can have 3 open sides but still have a solid roof. So as long as they are open on 3 sides, those type of structures are going to be allowed with this reduced setback, and only if they are adjacent to an open space lot. That's the main condition. And for detached one, those 3 conditions, which is the size, the height, and the screening requirement.
Shrupa, could you also please clarify what you mean by open space lot?
By open space lot, it can be a golf course or a public park or playground or any government-owned open space.
And we purposely limited it to those because we truly see the likelihood of a structure being on either of those 2 land uses not being constructed within 5 feet of the property line on the other side. So I know her slide spoke to open space, and she just mentioned open space. That's why I wanted her to clarify, because this would not come, this allowance would not come into play for properties, for example, that are adjacent to a platted HOA lot. Because every now and then you'll have a neighborhood, especially over on our west side, probably where we have more of them, but every now and then you'll come across an HOA lot that was platted in its open space. So this setback provision, this allowance does not apply to a lot that's adjacent to one of those open space platted lots.
Like a HOA platted lot, as you mentioned.
Any other questions? All right. This is a public hearing. I will now open the public hearing. If anyone's here who would like to speak, you can come forward and state your name and address for the record. Come on forward.
I apologize, Commission. Thank you for doing this tonight. I would be probably the person that wanted the pergola that got shot down.
Can you give us your name and address, please?
I'm sorry, David Luther. I live at 3332 Gatwick Place.
Thank you.
Farmers Branch, 75234. Let's see. So if I wanted to page to the next page, just arrow down. No?
Should be.
Use the mouse. Okay.
So you can go up or down.
Up or down? Okay, thank you. All right. A, thank you for revisiting the planning on this. B, I do have a couple of questions, and had I known, I just found out about the meeting was actually happening today. I could have emailed you all like what I first sent in, which would because our backyard is only 20 feet. And to explain, we live in Oak Brook Estates, which is on the northern edge of the Brookhaven Country Club golf course. Our backyard from fence to back of house is only 20 feet. All right. We did get a permission from Encore to be able to build on the lot, even though there was already a pool that has been there. But they said, we'll build it, but if we have to go through there and cut it up, we're going to cut it up. If that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. Club Corp at the same time gave us an approval to do the same. And they said, now this is against what we're just hearing here, but they were saying, as long as we don't go past our property line with the roof edge, they're fine with that. But it seems like there's another reason for that. And so, and I don't mean to bounce around here. So in essence, what we're just trying to do is be able to utilize our backyard to be able to enjoy it. We would like to put up a pergola, which would be the attached version, open on 3 sides. And I'm thinking that it's enclosed on the backside just because of the wall of the house would be on that backside. Okay. Where we're at, and I can understand if they set the ordinance the way they do. My concern is there a potential for a variance if we were wanting to take our roof line? From what I understand, if we have a 3-yard setback and a 5-yard setback, or 5 foot and 3 foot, is it 5 foot?
So in this particular case, for the attached accessory structure,
Right.
the pergola, the required setback was 10 feet. So we are proposing.
That was the original, was 10.
Original, so we are So we are proposing to change or reduce that setback to 5 feet.
With how much of a cantilever?
You mean projection?
Yes, from that 5 foot.
I think it's maximum 18 inches.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the building code, the question is how far can your roof cantilever or encroach within the required setback area? And I believe the ordinance allows maybe 18 inches to encroach the setback, probably from, with the eave, but don't quote me on that.
Thank you. So, prior to this, we were able to get our deck redone. And in the request for having the deck built, we were able to get the deck built all the way to the property lines on the side yard as well as the backyard. And one of the reasons we were able to do that is we were able to somewhat shore up our neighbor's driveway, which is kind of a little shady. But then we were also able to direct all of our stormwater flow more efficiently to the golf course, you know, by doing so. So now we have concrete decking that goes all the way to the fence line on our neighbor's side as well as the golf course. We'd like to put, you know, an outdoor, you know, kitchen, you know, and some things like that, you know, just so we can, you know, appreciate the backyard. And if we were to build a bar along the property line, you know, to sit at, and a kitchen along the fence, now we can't even cover it because it's not going to allow us to cover it. So I'm just wondering, is there a way that we can write it, or would a variance be approved in that effect if we do not encroach on our neighbor's visual sight whatsoever? The neighbors have given us permission to do so, which I can, you know, give. I can also ask Club Corp for permission that they wouldn't build anything within 10 feet of our property line. And if I were able to get those things, would that give me enough variance and clearance in y'all's mind to be able to achieve what we're trying to achieve?
I don't know if I fully understand what you're proposing, but what I can share with you that we had worked extensively with Hugh Pender, our Director of Community Services, as well as our city attorney, is we looked at whether or not there were some options to establish no-build easements on adjoining properties to allow for structures to be placed closer to a property line. And the feasibility of those easements being acquired is very challenging, especially particularly if a property has any sort of lender involved with it. And the legal documentation that's required related to not only the easement preparation, but also the lenders involved, involving properties being resurveyed, the lenders signing off on the easement, and then I was thinking there was one other provision coming into play. I'm looking at Shrupa, my expert. But anyway, so bottom line is the easement option was not determined to be a viable solution. So, you know, right now what's being proposed is for lots that back up to the golf course, that you're gaining an additional 5 feet compared to what you currently have under the zoning.
No, and I appreciate that.
So we've proposed to allow for that option. Like I said, you may have the opportunity to have your eave encroach up to 18 inches, which gathers you a little bit more space.
Is that
on the
18
lot, but
additional
without,
inches or 18 inches away from the property line?
it would be potentially additional into the setback. So, if that were to be allowed. But if you're asking for us to consider other alternate proposed layouts, then the commission's not in a position where they could render a decision based upon what you're explaining. What we're proposing before the commission for consideration this evening is in coordination with the Building Inspections and Community Services Department, factoring in what your original request was before the Board of Adjustment.
I got you. So I guess, I don't know if any of y'all can answer this, but then my request for a potential variance against that is there.
You're still going to run into a situation where you have to demonstrate a property hardship. So the way the zoning ordinance is structured is that if you're not able to fully comply with the requirements of the zoning ordinance, then there is a separate entity whom you've met, the Zoning Board of Adjustment, and you have to demonstrate that you have a property hardship. So you have to demonstrate that you have some sort of unique situation associated with your property that is denying you the benefit of enjoying your property compared to what your neighbors have. So if let's say cul-de-sac lots are a great opportunity many times because of their odd shape configuration. If you have a lot that happens to be on a cul-de-sac, but everybody else has the true traditional rectangular lot, and the building setbacks are all designed based upon your traditional rectangular lot, but because how the cul-de-sac property lines come together, you're being denied an opportunity to really use your property compared to the benefit or compared to your neighbors, then you may have a case for a property hardship because you're being denied basically similar rights that your neighbors have on that.
So one of the reasons I was denied on the last one was because they said I had 20 neighbors that have similar yard situations to me. Then my question back was, well, then don't all of us have the same hardship compared to everyone else in our district?
And I would say, no, you don't, but it's, and I wasn't at the zoning board of adjustment,
Right.
but in my professional opinion, if your lot is laid out just like all of your other lots and you all are subject to the same requirements, and others have been able to use their property accordingly in a manner that that's compliant with the zoning, then no, you don't have a property hardship because you do not have a unique situation that's being applied to your property where you're being denied the opportunity to use your property compared to others.
So if all 20 of us don't have the ability to use our property, then the 20 of us wouldn't have the hardship?
Well, keep in mind, the reason why we have setbacks is to be able to have things, protect life, health, safety,
Sure.
maintain open space and access to air. So it's, you know, the request that you've made before
Right.
the Planning and Zoning Commission is, or this proposed zoning ordinance amendment, I should say, as a result of your request before the Zoning Board of Adjustment, is to take into consideration providing some relief. And in this case, what we've been able to propose is to allow for the 5-foot reduction, provided that your lot is backing up to a golf course, which we've determined that that's the case. You're actually benefiting, for lots that are backing up to the golf course and or a public park, your lots are actually benefiting 5 feet of additional use of your backyard compared to properties elsewhere in town that do not back up to a golf course or a public park.
Right.
So some may argue that, well, we're being denied an opportunity for a benefit that these lots have. So it's, but nonetheless, like I said, the proposed ordinance amendment that's being brought forth is a solution that allows you the opportunity to have additional use of your property that others may not even benefit throughout the city.
No, and I appreciate that. I'm just here trying to get what I can. And, you know, hopefully make it work to everybody stays happy. So I love the city. I appreciate everything all of y'all do, even y'all up there on the screen. Thank you for your time. And I don't know how I would still make an argument to get them to change it, but I don't think I'm going to get very far. So, but we will take what we can get. So again, council or commission, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right.
Any more comments?
I hope that made sense, though.
It did, definitely. Anyone else who would like to speak to this? I do not see anyone. So with that, I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, any further discussion, or I'll entertain a motion.
I move to recommend approval of the zoning request.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Riddle and a second from Commissioner Zavala. All in favor? It is unanimous. This goes to council
January 19th.
January 19th. I would recommend you go to the council meeting. All right. Thank you, sir.
I'd take drawings.
And with that, I would like to thank the commissioners again for your time, and it is 8:13, and I will now close the meeting.